Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and today we have an early look at the brand new LEGO Dreamzzz Nightmare Shark Submarine. Despite it coming out basically just a couple of years after our last Nightmare Shark ship, it is kind of a remake of the flagship LEGO Dreamzzz set, except this time instead of a ship, it's a submarine. The cool thing is that today we're also going to be looking at the alternate build of the model, turning it from a regular shark into a hammerhead shark, and actually comparing the two models side by side for the first time in my early reviews. And so, join me as we take a look at the brand new LEGO Dreamzzz Nightmare Shark sub. Is it better or worse than the original Nightmare Shark ship? Let's find out right now. Here we are at the largest set of the wave, 71500, the Nightmare Shark Submarine. It retails for $150 or 140 euros and comes with 1,413 pieces. I feel like since this is the largest, I actually have quite a lot to say about this one, especially the alternate model, being a relatively substantial different build in terms of being a different type of shark with different attachments, but not transforming the build as radically as, say, the original Nightmare Shark ship, which turned it from a ship into a car. This set does include a few different minifigures, some of which are exclusive like the Dream Smasher, and we'll take a look at all the individual minifigures when we finish up the review of the build, but it actually is really cool to get a new version of Astrid, a new Logan, Dream Smasher being the main villain, and 3 different Nightmare Grimspawn there that actually have those really nice dual molded Spartan-like techno helmet molds. The set itself is obviously a homage or remake of the original Nightmare Shark ship, and I do find it a little bit strange how LEGO is remaking what was basically the flagship LEGO Dream set just a couple of years after the original one came out. It would be like getting a new Destiny's Bounty in Ninjago's 2013 wave, or a new version of the Nexo-Knights Fortrex in its 3rd year, but I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this was absolutely one of my favorite design styles for all of the LEGO Dream sets, so I'm really happy to get a set that builds off of that idea, even though I feel like the original just had a little bit more going on for it. Now, the default mode of the set is quite similar in some ways to the original. It is just your standard style of shark, where you can see, except this time, it has been changed over to have more of a submarine aesthetic, and most of that comes into this top cockpit here. The cockpit itself really only fits 1 or 2 minifigures if you want to squeeze them in, but essentially it's a place to store the Dream Smasher while he's piloting the ship. He's not super obvious to see once he's inside here because there isn't really any sort of large transparent window element. Just like an actual submarine, you really just have these slit windows, but I do appreciate the attention to detail when crafting this. You've got a little monitor on the inside showcasing some of the targets and really making it look like a submarine-like build, and then the entire thing lifts off to reveal a containment cage on the inside of the shark, which is exactly what we had on the original set as well. One of the things I do like about the way the containment set is done here is that it's utilizing these different iterations of the transparent pink windscreens, which kind of make it feel like a ribcage, but also still making it feel like a submarine that could go underwater if you wanted it to by being fully enclosed, not having the bones of the submarine just being fully open. Once you place this back on top, you'll notice some interesting additional details on the top of the way that this is mounted. You've got some, I guess, targets over here. I'm not really sure what those are supposed to represent, but I guess they're supposed to be different skull faces. They honestly feel very similar to like the hidden side sort of builds where they were supposed to interact with a digital thing, but I think that this is just meant to be for the aesthetics of the build. Now you can see here that you can remove these different guns here, and they act as little itty-bitty flyers for the Grimspawn included in the set, but honestly, they're really not very substantial. I guess they're flyers in the very basic sense of the word, but they don't really even have wings, so I don't feel like those are that interesting to use detached. Of course, there you can see the Dream Smasher inside of the submarine. It does come with those new dual molded brains they introduced for LEGO Dreamzzz this year, and then of course you can rotate the turrets or move them around should you please. I like how you have a periscope on the top of the brain as well. I feel like that's just a fun little design that really does make it feel more like a submarine. And then again, you can barely see your minifigure character inside of there. Some of the details I really appreciate about the set are the gills on the side. Again, adding into that shark aesthetic makes it feel really unique and fun to play with. You can also rotate the guns up and down on the side here, mounted on the fins, which you can use in flight. Of course, the laser turrets rotate back and forth as well, which is a nice and fun design. And then you have these guns mounted on the side of the ship where, if you twist the knob here, it actually fires the multi-6 stud shooter and spins the back technological element on the back of the submarine. It's a fun design, and I actually think that this is a pretty clever way to make it such that you have a movable feature that isn't just tied to a stud shooter, but also has some sort of kind of energy trail going back out of the back of the ship. This is a new element introduced for Dreamzzz Summer 2025, and I actually kind of like it. I feel like the large-scale blade elements introduced for Dreamzzz have been a little hit or miss. I wasn't a big fan of the leaf/jet engine piece from the first wave, and even the one earlier this year kind of just looks like a fart piece to me. It doesn't look very cool, but this one actually does look interesting in the way it's done. There's also some brand new elements introduced earlier this year for the LEGO Classic Transparent Brick Box introduced in this set as well, like the transparent reverse slope there, which is a really nice piece to get and technically a brand new mold because it's slightly different than the normal element. And I really like how LEGO has changed the transparent type of plastic they use to make pieces, which allows them to do more stuff like that, like having fully transparent bricks with their slopes, or even just having fully transparent plates as we've seen in some other themes. The Nightmare Shark Submarine also builds off of the swappable gimmick introduced for this year's early Dream sets, and while it isn't as crazy as some of the other ones, this one does introduce a few different modules that you can use to mix and match in pretty much all of the other LEGO Dream sets this year, and that's something that I really do appreciate. I love it when different sets have modularity, not just within the set itself, but also have components that you can use for each other, and this is no exception. In fact, you can really just get a slightly different setup here by just simply mounting the guns and fins in a reverse position, having the guns on the front and the fins in the back, and honestly, I kinda like the set a little bit better this way. Sure, at this point it is even closer to the original Nightmare Shark ship, but I feel like having the guns in the front is actually a genuinely really good look. The fins in the back are a little bit more realistic as well, and of course you can then angle them upwards and downwards since they are going to be mounted at a higher spot than they are going to be mounted on the front, and altogether, I just feel like that helps with the aggressiveness of the ship to have these big guns mounted on the front. I actually really like it, and I definitely feel that if you do buy the set, you can certainly just choose to arrange it whichever way you want, and I might even be keeping mine like this. Reverting it back to the way it's supposed to go though, let's take a quick look at some of the other functionality aspects of the set. Of course, the jaw can open and close, and opening the jaw wide enough allows you to launch 2 different flick-fire missiles from the mouth, which is a really nice touch. These are the spring-loaded kind used primarily in LEGO Star Wars sets, but I really do like how there is a rubber stopper on the inside, which basically stops you from launching it every time you open the mouth, so you can do stuff like this just fine, but then if you push it open wide enough, you have the option to fire them in rapid succession, except they're not going to be at the same time, which I think is pretty cool, just adds to the quote-unquote realism of it. The ship itself is actually pretty swishable, it is a lot of fun to play with, but the real fun begins when you get to the alternate model of this set, and special thanks to Sean for building the alternate model and letting me film some footage comparing the two next to each other. Now, if you actually take a look at the differences between these two builds, it's pretty significant on the upper area of the ship. They didn't just change the way the ship is done, turning it into a hammerhead shark, you actually have a very different layout of the different attachments you get for the submarine itself. Instead of having the guns on the side, you have turrets mounting the 2 guns on the top, which I actually kind of like better because I feel like it is a bit more of an interesting build. The same goes for the top of the ship. Instead of having the submersible style of sort of attachment element on the top here, you've got more like 2 smokestack style elements here. I feel like the only thing with the alternate model is it feels like less of a submarine. You don't have some of the traditional submarine elements like the periscope or these 2 different kind of antennae on the top. Instead, this one feels more like an aggressive flying ship, where you have these big turrets, you've got some larger flying craft on the sides of the vessel, you've got some sort of a radar there, and then you have the smokestacks, which make it feel like a standard ship. So it is just a different aesthetic they're going for, but the base of the set is the same. You can see that most of the bones of the ship are the same, but instead, you just use different elements when making the front of the ship. And I actually kind of like the alternate build better here because at the very least, it feels very different compared to the original Nightmare Shark ship that we got just a few years ago. Whereas this one just feels like kind of a slightly worse and less interesting version of that original set. The alternate model feels like a very different creature, even though it is just utilizing mostly the same bodywork here. The fins are the same, you mount the top fin on the back instead, which does also feel a bit more realistic, but again, the profile of both builds is very different because you have the guns at the top, and especially after a relatively disappointing alternate model for the previous large set of this wave with the paint truck, this is a really nice build where it definitely feels like you're building something substantially different, even though for LEGO Dreamzzz, you do start by building most of the same original bones of the ship. I really would have loved to see, however, a very different alternate model because it does feel like this is just a slightly different build with one shark to another, but I do like how there are some slight differences like the two side vessels for the flyers being a lot more substantial for the alternate build as compared to the original build there, and it just feels like a more playable set. There's more things to do with it in terms of rotating the turrets back and forth, you can aim them up and down as well, so altogether, I definitely feel like the Hammerhead variation of this set is just simply a lot more fun. And, of course, I'm very curious what folks think in the comments as well. Do you like the fact that the alternate build is a different submarine? Would you have liked it to do something a little bit more different, like say turn it into a car or something like that, like the original one did? Or are you happy with the way the alternate build does capture just different things you can do with the same sort of shark submarine template, just a different shark to play with? Altogether, I'm a fan of the set, and price-wise and value-wise, I definitely do feel like the value is there. $150 is relatively fair for what you get for a set like this, and for 1,413 pieces, I do feel like I am getting my money's worth with the different pieces integrated into the set. It feels like while this is a natural evolution, and maybe even a bit of a downgrade compared to the original Nightmare Shark ship, which just had a little bit more going on, this is genuinely a lot of fun to play with, and if you don't own that original set, this is a pretty nice substitute. But now let's take a look at the minifigures of this set. The show isn't out yet, but from the trailers, this appears to be the new main villain of Season 3, the Dream Smasher, who initially masquerades as a hero and then later reveals his villainous tendencies. Dream Smasher for a main Dreamzzz villain is honestly not that interesting of a design, and most of that is because he doesn't really use any new molds. He is just using the standard Ant-Man helmet, he has a plain black head underneath the helmet, but I will say, the design is actually relatively clean, and while he doesn't actually have any new molds, I really do appreciate the dual molded legs, the fact that you have some really nice technical detail, and the print on the helmet is genuinely pretty cool. Although I will say his minions and some of the other characters feel a little bit more interesting of a main design for a villain than him, and I honestly would have preferred even just something a bit more interesting than just this very standard design for an Ant-Man style helmet. It is cool to get a trans neon fluorescent cape though. I actually think that it is a pretty cool color to get for a fabric element. Moving on, he does have, of course, his legion of minions in this set, and these minions are sporting the dual-molded sort of Spartan-style helmet that we got introduced to this year. This is a really cool piece, but very specific for Dreamzzz. Obviously, the pixel-style design is very, very much only something that can be used in this video game villain realm, but I do like the headpiece on these minions. It feels very technological, kind of reminds me of Nexo Knight's Wave 3 for the design, but overall, it's a really cool helmet piece that I wish that LEGO was able to include in more sets, but it is very specific in its nature. Despite this set being a villain focus set, we do get a lot more heroes than villains though, which is a little bit strange because typically you would think that's the other way around in a set focused on those characters. That being said, many of these characters are exclusive, which is pretty cool. Mateo does appear in one other set in this outfit, but he is a very nicely produced minifigure. He is sporting a red cape with a custom cut for it. He does have his standard dual-sided head, the standard hairpiece as well, but my favorite thing about this figure is the fact that the legs are not just dual dual molded in silver and red, but also featuring some really intricate printing on the sides of the legs, which really make him feel very detailed compared to a lot of other main LEGO themed protagonists. Astrid is exclusive to this set, although I don't think she was supposed to be. Obviously, she was supposed to have a set focused on her, which we still haven't gotten yet. Very, very sad we don't get an Astrid focus set yet, and we may never get that, but the minifigure is very nicely done. The only thing that I feel like could be improved is that the headpiece is just a generic LEGO City headpiece, which is really just not that interesting. There's not even an alternate face, so she is just stuck with that facial expression, but the new dual molded crown and hair combo looks really, really nice. I'm a big fan of the way they pulled it off. You kind of have a technological aspect with a communications device going onto the side of the mouth, which is really cool, and altogether, it is a very nicely produced minifigure, just not one of the more interesting ones in terms of the face print. The torso and leg design is brand new for the character, and I think it's just alright. It's nothing super crazy. I feel like it is just your standard LEGO Dreamzzz sort of technological design. Feels almost like it could be a spacesuit. It reminds me of the LEGO Monkey Kid spacesuits that we got just a couple years back, but that's not a bad thing. I do think that this is a very nicely detailed figure, and while the applications are fairly limited to LEGO Dreamzzz, because while it does sort of look like Castle's style of armor, you do have just a standard zipper on it, and it maybe could fit in a futuristic setting. It is very specific for the character, but that hairpiece is very cool. Next up in our heroes lineup is another exclusive minifigure to this set, and that is Logan. Logan is sporting a brand new dual molded hat with dog ears component, which is pretty interesting. I'm sure it's going to be only used for this minifigure, but it is a really nicely produced piece. You've got the X and O for the video game design on the top there, dual molded into the hat, and he does have an alternate expression as well with an angry face on the back of the head. The torso design is actually pretty fun. I like how it has this sort of monster-like design on it. You do have a really nice amount of detailing on the legs, although I do feel like maybe you could have benefited from dual molding on the legs. You can clearly see one half of the legs was supposed to be regular blue, while the other half was supposed to be dark blue, but unlike some of the other characters, it's not that bad. And then finally, you do just have a standard civilian to be rescued here who is completely fast asleep, and I think it's an okay design. No alternate expression on the head. That is basically what you see is what you get. I would have loved to see one without the VR goggles, but honestly I think it's okay for what it is. And with that, we have summed up our review of the Nightmare Shark Submarine. Feels like a bit of a rehash of what we've gotten before, but honestly I do like it for what it is. And with that, we have summed up my thoughts on this summer 2025 LEGO Dream set. Let me know in the comments below, do you like it, do you dislike it, will you be buying it when it releases on June 1st this year worldwide, which is a bit of a departure from Dreamzz's normal August launch time, and let me know in the comments what you think of the set as a whole. Thank you so much for watching this early review. Special thanks to LEGO for providing this product for review, although of course all opinions have been my own, and of course stay tuned for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks, and bye for now.